and welcome in to another episode of Heat of the Moment. My name is Micah. I'm joined as always by my fellow host and friend Lino. As you can see, there's a lot of changes happening on the podcast this week. Lino got a great new haircut and I got some sort of virus. So we try to bring good and bad news on these episodes. Speaking of bad news, the Heat have been struggling. So in this episode, we'll be covering the 5-game losing streak, maybe what's been going on within it. We'll also update you on some injury news. And then, like any good Heat podcast, at the end, we will finish out with some trade rumors and discussion. Because what's a Heat fan if we're not obsessed with the next big star we're going to acquire? But Lino, I think the best place to start is the news and notes. And injuries, unfortunately, is what's going to lead this section. I think the most concerning one right now is Tyler's toe injury. So it's officially been reported as a toe contusion, which is not super enlightening in terms of like what kind of injury this is going to be for Tyler. And of course, the Heat always list every player as day to day. So we don't really know exactly how that'll go. But just to give people a recap if they haven't been paying attention, Tyler played the first 17 games of the season, missed the first 17 games of the season. Then he played 5 games, hurt his toe against Dallas. So then he missed 2 games. Then he came back in the Orlando for the Cup. And then we had like 5 days off. And then he's in the starting lineup for the game against the Raptors. And then it's like a last second scratch and doesn't play. So a lot of weirdness. Anthony Chang I believe it's the Miami Herald, interviewed Tyler and said, basically, he was asking what was going on. Anthony Chang confirmed Hero had a second MRI on Tuesday, which was just yesterday. That's his second MRI in less than 2 weeks. Hero said he took a Toradol shot to play against the Magic, and he said, quote, "It hasn't really gotten better. I probably shouldn't have practiced. I'm just trying to control the swelling and inflammation." So that doesn't sound awesome. Lino, what are your thoughts?
Sounds like he broke his toe. Like, I'm pretty sure his toe is cooked, which is super unfortunate because feet injuries in basketball players are very, very tricky. They can be pretty minor at a certain level if you can get the requisite amount of rest and recovery. But if you try to play through it, you can just have a messed up foot for a long time. Look at players like Embiid. Obviously, this is something, that narrative's maybe more about bigger players, forwards, and things like that, but it can definitely affect guards for sure. So it's unfortunate. His whole kinetic chain from the base up seems to be kind of malnourished down there, like with the ankle, the toe. Yeah, he's got some situations down there in his feet. I'm not sure if it's the same foot either. I'm curious of which foot it is in comparison to where his original surgery was. But obviously, having recently gotten surgery, there can be complications there as well. Lots to stipulate, but with so little news, it's hard to tell because the toe contusion can also just mean he's got a bruise and it just sucks right now, which
Yes.
could be unfortunate, but not too bad in the long run of things. But
Mm-hmm.
my hope is that, he can get fully healthy because clearly we're going to need him, which will be probably a big part of our conversation moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And as we're recording right now, it's the evening of December 17th. The Heat play Brooklyn tomorrow. Tyler has been ruled out, but that Brooklyn game is part of a 3-game road trip in which Tyler did travel for. So the hope is that he'll play on one of those games. It could be Friday versus Boston. That's the second night of a back-to-back. The other quick note is Norman Powell is questionable for Thursday's game against Brooklyn with calf tightness. I fear they're going to do this alternating Powell Hero thing. So Powell might play the Brooklyn game and then miss the Boston game. We'll see what happens. But yeah, we definitely need everyone available to hopefully try and end this losing streak. But we'll see what happens. Next up is a very scary injury that luckily sounds like it will not end up being too bad, and that is Nikola Jovic took a really scary fall in the Heat's last game against Toronto. It is just another unfortunate bullet point on what has been, frankly, a snake-bitten season for Nico. He checks in, multiple guys out, seems like, okay, maybe he can make a quick impact, and almost immediately he gets fouled going up for a dunk, lands, and it looked like his whole body was in pain. It was really hard to tell what he injured exactly. I thought it was his back to begin with. ends up being taken out of the off the court in an air cast, which in football that usually means a compound fracture. Sounds like that did not happen. It sounds like the impact made his elbow split open essentially. So I think he was bleeding a lot, and that's why they went with
Mhm.
the air cast. But again, he's listed as day to day. He did not travel, so he probably won't play any of this road trip. But it does sound like it's not a super serious injury. So well wishes to Nico. The other quick injury update: Pelle Larsson is still out. He also did not travel for this road trip, so I would not expect to see him for any of the 3 games.
Do you remember what Pele was out with?
It was the ankle. He turned his
Ankle.
ankle. I believe it was against Orlando.
Mhm.
It was very scary though, just a random side note, but
Oh,
he
'cause, like,
grabbed his
non-contact.
Achilles.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then the replay showed he did step on someone's foot, but I didn't see that initially, and it was very frightening. But yeah, so Pella, they said it would be a few weeks. So
Mhm.
hopefully maybe sometime next week we'll get him back. But yeah, that leads us into the next news and notes. Adam Silver did a press conference before the NBA Cup in Vegas, and shout out to Tim Reynolds of the Associated Press for finally asking him a direct question about the Terry Rozier situation. And you know, Adam Silver is a lawyer by trade. He gave a pretty lawyer-y answer where he said he's sympathetic to the Heat situation. It's a unique situation. I think he also called it unprecedented. He said it may require a unique solution, and that he, the league office, the Heat, and the other teams would come to a solution that essentially he felt like was fair. Lino, this whole situation is so strange. Anyone that's missed any episodes, Terry Rozier is currently suspended or not with the team because he was arrested by the FBI. He obviously can't play, and now everyone's looking in hindsight. Hey, Miami traded a first round pick for this guy. The league and the Hornets knew that he was being federally investigated and didn't mention it to anyone, including the Heat. So the Heat traded for this guy. Are they owed some kind of compensatory pick? In a nutshell, did you hear Silver's comments? Did you take anything away from this? Do you have any new thoughts, I guess, on the Terry situation?
I took some good and some bad from the comments. One, I was glad that Tim Reynolds asked the question. Generally, I think it's super another super exciting part about the cup is this Adam Silver, like, midway point interview. Like, I think this happened last year where he just like answering questions about really anything anybody wants to ask him. I think that's really cool. I do like that he does seem to be on the agenda for the league and not something that they're trying to sweep under the rug or ignore. It does sound poignant and like in front of them, which is important. What I didn't appreciate is that there's not really a timeline on when they're going to make that decision. Is we could have some very critical trade potential here at the deadline in the next few months. And a lot of those conversations are happening now. And it's very difficult to start those conversations. I remember early on, there was word of the league waiting till Miami had a situation where they needed a concrete trade to be able to get the league to start talking about it. Teams are not going to take you seriously if they have no idea what your assets are. And so that already is a giant hurdle in itself. So hopefully they come to a conclusion and one that is fair for us and one that is timely because it's going to affect the rest of our season in a really major way, from my opinion. Bill Simmons had similar sentiments regarding Adam Silver's comments in regards to like we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know what to do. And Bill was like, it's your job. Like you have a job because when stuff pops up like this, you have to take care of it. So hopefully he will. In general, I think Silver's done, a good job of handling certain situations. Maybe not the best job of handling others, but usually he deals with stuff one way or the other. So hopefully we will get an answer soon.
Yeah, and Anthony Chang reported today in a new article for the Herald that uh, sources close to the Heat are pretty much under the assumption that as soon as Rozier's, I think how they phrase it is, name comes up in trade talks, the Heat will then push to immediately get clarity on what
Hmm.
this situation is. I feel like the unsaid part of that is the Heat and the league must have some kind of understanding that this will, at least some kind of resolution on if they're able to trade him or not, will happen before the trade deadline, I would think. Because
Yeah,
I don't know how, as a front office, you couldn't be panicked going into a deadline, not knowing if you could trade $26 million
exactly.
dollars or
It's a
not.
lot.
And Brian Windhorst and Tim Bontemps were on the Hoop Collective today. They both said they don't think there's any chance the Heat get their draft pick back. I agree with that. I don't think they'll get their first back. I optimistically, I think maybe a compensatory pick could happen. They could basically create like a 31st pick in the draft or something similar to what other sports leagues do. I
Mhm.
feel like that's fair. This is an unprecedented situation. I know a lot of people say like, "Oh, that would open such a can of worms," for transactions and stuff. But this feels pretty unique to me. So I don't think that there would be a lot of analogs that would come up where it's like, "Well, this is just like the Rozier thing. Give us a free first round pick." But and as Heat fans know, the real value of the first round pick this season wouldn't be that it would be the 31st pick in the draft, or I guess actually next season. It's that it would unlock the Heat to be able to trade more first round picks. So, if for
Mhm.
anyone that doesn't know, the NBA has what's called the Stepien rule. It doesn't allow you to trade multiple first round picks in consecutive years. So, you can only essentially trade a first round pick every other year. Because the Heat already have one outgoing to Charlotte in the Terry Rozier trade, they are only eligible to trade two first round picks right now. So for the guys we're going to talk about later, like Giannis, you really want like four first round picks to throw at a superstar like that. And so, but potentially getting a compensatory pick would allow you to trade more first. Now, I tried to look up the history of compensatory picks in the NBA today. All I could find is like when free agents would leave in the 70s,
Mm.
the incumbent team would get like a pick or something. There used to be like 8 rounds back then. There really
There's
isn't.
something similar in the NFL like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
but there's not a lot to be taken from it. So I don't even know if a compensatory pick would allow them to bypass the stepping rule. I don't know if they'd be allowed to trade a compensatory pick. All of it would be uncharted waters, but surely at the very least, they will be able to trade this contract. Um,
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
believe
that's the
it's
minimum of, like, what we need most importantly is to get rid of this contract or be able to move it. Second most important thing is even if they don't give us a pick, but they give us some kind of exception to be able to make trades, that we would otherwise be able to make without that or that we would be able to make otherwise with that pick if we had it and didn't trade for Terry Rozier. As long as the result makes sense, I don't necessarily care about the method in which they get us there. I think it's pretty clear what the team needs and what kind of obstacles are in front of us because of this trade. And as long as there's a solution that gets to solving those problems, then I could care less about getting the 31st pick in the first round. And I don't know that teams should really make a fuss about it because I don't know that it makes much of a difference
right. It would
across
only
the
be to
board.
unlock more tradable first for sure.
Mhm.
Um, and then the other part of this that I think is worth noting, I believe it was Tim Bontemps for ESPN did note that a few years ago, a very different kind of criminal case, very serious one, but similar in that it was an ongoing criminal investigation. Kevin Porter Jr. was arrested on assault charges while he was a member, I believe, of the Houston Rockets, and he was allowed to be traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder that then waived him, which is what I would assume any team trading for Terry would do. It would just be because he's an expiring contract. So that's something to keep in mind that there is somewhat of a precedent in that situation. It's just because someone's under an investigation or has been charged with something doesn't mean they're not able to be traded.
Mhm.
But that's pretty much the news and notes. Lino, I'll let you lead off on this next part. As all Heat fans listening, I'm sure know, they're in the midst of a 5 game losing streak. I think the best place to start is what would you say is the biggest issue for these 5 game losings or five losses?
Honestly, I think it's consistency overall. I was just rewatching the game against Toronto last night and just trying to find some major takeaways. And between that game and the game against Orlando, I was like, these teams feel evenly matched. And Toronto's having a good season. Orlando's really starting to turn their season around again. Those are two teams that it doesn't feel too bad to be so close to. Um, and overall, I thought we performed really great for 3 quarters, at least, in both of those games. But even in those 3 quarters, the shooting fell off. I thought the spacing was kind of an issue. And then the pace, of course, has been down. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. But overall, it's just a matter of getting back to how we played before, which, in regards to the Tyler Hero agenda, I thought it was a good thing for him in that we kind of look bad with or without him because guys just aren't playing at the same speed. I think this was kind of the big challenge going into this season and seeing how this offense started. It was like, can they keep this up? Can they still shoot at this high of a clip? Can they, get out and run at this pace consistently in December, in January, when it's really difficult to do anything? And can they keep up the effort and the synchronization between players as guys inevitably go down with injuries, as people start to rotate, as players potentially get traded? When these kind of conversations come up, what's going to happen to the team? So overall, consistency is the big thing I'm looking at across the board. And I think that kind of touches on every single aspect on both sides of the ball. But, what about you?
Yeah, I think this little stretch has been a good showcase of maybe some of the shortcomings of this specific offensive style against high level defensive teams. And if you look at this stretch, now the Sacramento game, obviously Sacramento's not a good defensive team, but it's third game in 4 nights, second night of a back to back, no Tyler, no Davion. It wasn't a great home loss, but it is at least understandable. But if you look at Dallas, Orlando again, and then Toronto, those are all top 10 defenses. And they all use players that are large, lengthy defenders. And for Miami's system, I mean, they need to be able to attack guys in isolation. And it's not kind of the Boston Celtics style of like you call up the weakest defender and try and attack them. They kind of attack everybody a little bit with this drive and kick kind of style they're playing. So when you're playing a team like Orlando that's throwing out 5 pretty solid defenders at a time, usually, that can really slow things down. Also, like you alluded to, there's more film on it. Teams understand what Miami wants to do. They're picking up a little sooner in transition. Some teams are picking up full court to slow them down from pressing the ball. And I think, and I this is something I want to get into because I'd say this is the main thing I've heard other people refer to as maybe the reason the Heat are losing. The 3-point shooting recently has fallen off a cliff. And for some context, the last 5 games, the Heat are shooting 29% from three. So that would rank dead last over a season by a wide margin. But also, their opponents are shooting 43% from three, which would rank first by a large margin. So their cold spell has coincided with some really hot shooting from their opponents. Now that's unfortunate, but it's basketball, right? So it's not like, oh, they didn't make their shots, they lost. There's a lot more nuance and context going on here.
Mhm.
But one thing I did think that highlighted this a little bit for the season, the Heat are shooting 43% on wide open threes. So the NBA.com has tracking data. It's essentially like you're open by 6 feet. They're shooting 43% on those shots for the season. During this 5-game losing streak, they're shooting 29% on wide open threes. And so to
Mhm.
me, that is a little more fluky. Now, you could argue these good teams are leaving the right guys open. But Lino, have you seen it has the quality of 3-point looks gone down? Have the guys taken them been the wrong guys? What do you think is the biggest issue with the 3-pointers right now?
You mentioned that, and the first thing that comes to mind was kind of the last thing I saw at the end of that Toronto game. Is there was a drive-in by Powell that he kicked out to a wide open Andrew Wiggins, and I was just certain that Wiggs was going to drain that three. He's such a clutch player at the end of the games for the most part. Just whiffs it, and I've seen that happen a couple times from a lot of different guys. Several guys like Simone Fontecchio have kind of fallen off a cliff a little bit from shooting, and that's not exactly what we expected from a specialist like him. And then there's guys like Jaime Jaquez Jr., Drew Smith, Palo Larson, guys who, aren't exactly expected to make them, who were probably regressing back to the mean. And so there's a combination of flukiness and expected regression taking place. But overall, I think sometimes we're generating good shots. Sometimes we're passing out of good shots. And as guys are starting to lose confidence, we're running out of space. The main culprit is Jaime Jaquez Jr. I thought early on, even though he was never really shooting from three that well, his confidence in shooting was pretty high to start the season. He was getting them up there to the point where defenders at least had to get out there. And now he's pretty much pump faking out of almost every 3-point attempt. And he's just going to go down this pattern of finding it difficult to find space to get to the paint, as I know he likes to do. So some of these guys are just going to have a little bit of come to Jesus moment with themselves about what they need to do in order to create the space for themselves. Some of these guys are just going to have to start making these shots that they're creating. But overall, I do think the wheel itself hasn't been as functional before. And I don't know if that's defensive adjustments or guys just not necessarily being dialed into what they're supposed to do. I feel like we're seeing an uptick in turnovers from misexpected passes, fake cuts that people weren't really looking for, and people not exactly rotating the way we saw the wheel rotate at the beginning of the season. So all that's kind of playing into some poor shot making, but also just the wrong decisions at each instance and once they need to decide if they're going to shoot or not. But are there any players in particular you've been concerned about with the shooting? Any guys that you feel confident are going to get back into shooting well?
Yeah, I think what you're highlighting is this team, what they're dealing with right now is kind of the inverse of what they started the season with, which they were probably shooting a little above their heads. I mean, we talked in the preseason, shooting was a concern for this roster, and their opponents weren't shooting that well early on. So I think some of this is water finding its level. Unfortunately, it's in an extreme way, but if that gets us to average faster, maybe that'll be all right. But to me, I do think some of it is the composition of the team, right? So when you look at their two best shooters, I don't think anyone would tell you anything other than it's Norman Powell and Tyler Hero. First of all, we
Mhm.
got to get those guys on the court at the same time. That's a separate issue. But the problem is those are also their two best scorers. So it's really the ancillary players that you need to knock down shots because yes, Tyler and Norm will get some threes, but they're really going to be a lot more self-created. The created threes, the ones you need to keep your offense flowing to create space for other people to do other things, is when Tyler drives in and draws a double, or when Norm, comes flying from the corner and two guys, attached to him and he kicks over to the weak side. Those are the shots you need guys knocking down. And like you said, right now, Jaime is a team or as a player that teams have decided if the ball's not in his hands, he's not on the court. We don't see him. And you saw that several times. Toronto is a very good team at protecting the paint. They have great length, and they were more than happy to sag all the way off of Jaime and be like, yeah, kick it to the corner. And oftentimes, like you said, Jaime's pump faking, and then all the momentum of that possession has essentially died. And now you're back into slowed down one-on-one without much of an advantage. But then other guys, I mean, you look at Pelle Larson, he's down to 33%. Jovic, I mean, he never really got going, but he's at 30%. Jaime's at 23%. Bam's down to 34%. Drew Smith is at 35%. Those guys are all under 50th percentile for their respective positions. So that's when you start to kind of get worried. And it's like, yeah, Tyler and Norm can drive and create and do all these things, but unless they're doing that for each other, which they're not playing together much, even when they are both healthy, then they're kicking to these guys that look like they're losing confidence. So I'm worried a little bit. I think teams are starting to realize the wheel, this new. I've been trying to come up with a good name for it. I've been workshopping slash and dash, but this new offense the Heat are running, I think teams are starting to realize like, yeah, there's a lot of movement, and some nights there hasn't even been that, but there's a lot of movement, but it's not really that threatening. Like if we all just kind of sink in, we can see, can Jaime beat us from three tonight? Can Drew Smith beat us from three tonight? So there's been some concerns. Obviously, 29% on wide open threes. That will get better. I don't think the Heat are a 29% three-point shooting team, but they probably are more middle of the pack than we would like to think.
Yeah, and I think there's plenty of season to find out, but I do to your point about, teams are getting used to the movement and sometimes there's not really any movement. I do think the movement has come to a screeching halt in regards to the pace at which this team has been playing. Some of that is the full court pickup. Some of it is against just, teams that defensively have a philosophy of getting us down into the mud, and there's only so much you can do about it. But guys simply aren't moving the same way they did in October. And without that, it's just going to be difficult to really find success here. It's funny because sometimes Chloe Ware will be out there, and I feel like he's got the highest motor out of anybody on the court, which is a
Honestly.
funny thing to say. Which I don't know if we have this on the itinerary to talk about, but what's the deal with like his minutes? Do you feel like Spo's overthinking some things or what? Because I feel like from what I've seen from him out there, I thought he's played super well, and I kind of expected that to translate into more time with him on the court. and it does not seem to be the case.
Yeah, I think this is a good little, detour to hit because the Kalel conversation is definitely one that has been at the forefront lately. And I think in some ways you look at, okay, what has the team been struggling with? Over this losing streak, their offense would rank last. Their defense would rank 11th. So, and that's with teams shooting 43% from three. So the defense, I think, has actually been very good lately. And the rebounding has been pretty good. So the offense has crashed. So while I understand why people are quick to say Kalel should play more, Kalel's playing well. Unfortunately, the only way to play Kalel more is to play him with Bam, right? Unless you're taking
Mhm.
minutes away from Bam, which I don't think that's a net positive. And then if you're playing Kalel with Bam, then you just hurt your shooting all over again, right? Like I know, Kalel's shooting an okay percentage. Bam's three has looked better, but these aren't guys that teams are going to be guarding at the 3-point line, which again, those are two guys they'll say, hey, we'll see if they can beat us from three tonight. And I think that's the problem. I know it sounds simple to just say play your best players, but when they're centers, it is a little harder. Like Norman Tyler are both shooting guards, but you can throw them both out there most nights and it won't
Mhm.
look that crazy. But Kalel and Bam, there's some significant schematic issues really on both sides of the ball, but especially offensively that they kind of
Mhm.
present. So and Spo's mentioned this before, but I think they would have to be like number one by a mile on defense with both of them on the court for him to go to it for long stretches, and then they just haven't been
Yeah.
there yet.
And also, another thing to keep in mind for the fan base out there is that the problem with playing both of them as starters, which I am a fan of and somewhat a proponent of, as far as Spo finding a way to get to those minutes, the problem is we don't have the depth in our front court to really be able to support having them both on the floor to start and to finish games, because inevitably that translates to minutes where we have neither of them on the floor, which I don't think we can afford, as much as I've actually been somewhat impressed with Keldon Johnson's improvements over the past few games. We just don't have enough size and strength and skill, honestly, at the power forward and center position behind those two to be able to support not having either of them on the floor at really any given time. Not
Mhm.
that Ware is the most important person to have on the floor in those bench minutes, but he's a great backup to Bam in a lot of ways, and we don't really have a great backup to him or another great backup to Bam. So it's going to be challenging for Spo to get there. I do think I would like to see more of it. I don't know that we've really gotten enough time with it to show if it can give us the best defense in the league. I mean, we've seen other Twin Tower pairings that have, really shown some incredible things on that end on both sides of the ball, really, as that kind of pairing gets more time on the court together. But I understand that, yeah, I think our answers to our current problems are probably at the wing position and in the guard core and trying to find the right combination there.
Yeah, and I think in the past couple games, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head, Spo has gone to the wear Bam look at least a couple times, but
Mhm.
he does treat Kalel like a role player right now, and you can kind of think of it as like a shooter. Like if Simone's hot, Spo will leave Simone in a little more. But, Spo does the same thing with Kalel if he's playing really hard, rebounding, being in the right position defensively. So, and I think he's been doing those things more and more often. So I think we'll see more of him as the season goes on. The game where he only played 12 minutes, I believe that was the NBA Cup game. That was
Yeah.
tough. That's far too low. I think on the season he's averaging 20 minutes a game. Of course, some of those numbers are boosted by the time Bam was out and he was playing starter minutes, but
Mhm.
still, I think you want Kalel in the 20-minute plus range.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're gonna be playing him over some great shooter. Like that's the other thing, and maybe people listening are thinking that right now, but it's like, okay, who are you gonna play Kalel with? Like you're gonna play
Mhm.
Pella alongside Bam. He's shooting worse from three than Kalel. He's not being guarded out there. So I get it. And ultimately he's the player on the roster with the most upside, right? So
Yeah.
at a point, if you lost five in a row, it would be you can't know this, but it would be nice to know a little more about Kalel and Bam together if you were gonna lose anyway. So
Mhm.
I get the people that want to see more of it for sure.
Yeah.
And let's see. Oh, what have you thought about the pace?
I think guys are this was my big concern about this style of play was that I don't know if we have the depth to keep this up. Because you saw early on, even in the first week or two of games, we were playing at this breakneck pace, but guys were getting subbed out every like 3 minutes. Like Bam would get subbed out for like 45 seconds and then come back just so he could have a breather and be fresh out there. I don't think Spo feels that he can afford to do that as much anymore, as far as just being a little bit going deeper into the rotation, especially with injuries and things of that nature. And I think guys are just getting more tired as we get deeper into the season. Getting into this back half of the season without the cup games may change things, hopefully. Um, but overall, my big fear was that this wouldn't be as sustainable. And I think, especially with our injuries and the particular type of injuries we have, Pella's out with an ankle, Tyler's out with a toe. Those are going to be huge body parts important for running up and down the court a lot. Those kind of things are going to add up as the season goes on. And I do think we're going to slow down. I don't know that because I think you have it on here that we would have ranked 17th in pace over these past few games during this losing streak. I don't
Mhm.
think our pace will, level out at that point. I don't know that we'll be able to keep up that first in pace, especially as teams are starting to figure out how to slow us down. Part of that does seem intentional in response to the defense.
Yeah, no, those are all good points. And Matt Moore, who I feel like is a resident Heat hater, but no, he does a good job. He's good at his job. But he follows like the gambling side of NBA stuff more, and he had an interesting stat that teams that have just played Miami, so that their next game after playing the Heat are 500 against the spread. Or no, sorry, favorites are 500. So for I don't know a lot about gambling, but what he was saying is when you're favored, you're like have a 70% chance to win essentially on average. So the teams that normally are expected to win 70% of the time are only winning 50% of the time after having played Miami. And his explanation was like these teams are exhausted. Like even when Miami doesn't win, they're kind of winning the game for the next team these teams are playing, which is crazy to think about. But it's also like Miami's the team that just played in that game every game.
Yeah,
They just and
that's a really good point.
they're the most conditioned, best, da 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 da. We all saw the court, but that will wear on you at a point. And so, yeah, I am a little fearful. I also know some people have pointed out the Memphis offense kind of stagnated last season after a hot start. And so
Hmm.
this is also, it's not identical to what Memphis is running, but this is another Noah LaRoche offense that, Spo has tinkered with. But so there could be some drawbacks. I would say, and maybe even more than the pace, 3-point rate is something I'm concerned about. In the
Hmm.
NBA today, you have to take a lot of threes. Like there's a mathematic equation unless you have like a weird outlier like Houston with the offensive rebounding or Denver with Jokic, like you have to take a lot of threes. Right now the Heat are 23rd in 3-point frequency. So the amount of the shots they're taking that are threes. Last year they were 12th. And for
Oh, wow.
reference, last season Memphis was 19th. So I do wonder, or I fear, I guess, this one-on-one style is not super conducive to generating a lot of threes, especially with somebody like Tyler who was able to get, I think, over 10 attempts a game last season. So many of those came in the pick and roll. They were self-created, but I mean, teams were in a drop. He would come off and take the shot. Step back threes, like that's your best shooter. You need to take more threes. So I know we've seen a few more pick and rolls lately, but I do really hope they're able to find a better marriage because I think if they're going to stay at 23rd in 3-point frequency, we're going to see a lot more difficult offensive nights because you kind of stop yourself from winning the game with threes if you're not taking enough of them.
You don't give yourself really that chance to break away. And I thought when we were shooting a lot of threes early on, um, it allowed for us to win some games by some heavier margins. Whereas right now we're just going to be stuck in clutch games if all we're getting to is this mid range and getting in the paint and stuff like that. And part of it you can kind of see the lack of threes, especially when half the team has to pump fake out of their open threes. There's at least three guys on the roster who have probably gotten an open pass at the 3-point line and pump faked out of it or tried to get to the paint naturally, as that's where they're more comfortable scoring, and that is just going to drop down the rate when we still need those guys to probably shoot half of those, at least half of them. Like you don't have to shoot them all. You create a lot more leverage when you do show the other team that you're willing to shoot them. And it's also great if they go in. So, yeah, hopefully we'll get some more threes up. But I did see some fun, like 2-man stuff with Norm and Bam at the end of the Toronto game that I hope we get to see more of as the season goes on, because I do think that should be a pretty effective pairing. And I'm curious if we'll do any interesting, once we get Norm and Tyler in there, some interesting like guard to guard stuff with those two as we put guys into a weird decision making tree with Norm and Tyler pick and rolls. I think Spo has a lot of room to still get really creative with the talents on this roster. So hopefully we'll see those play out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that covers the losing streak for the most part. The shooting's a concern. The offense in general is a concern. The pace, I think, will normalize. I think we're kind of seeing the shooting normalize. Like, this isn't normal, but it's kind of the regression to the mean is what we're seeing. And it's worth noting the defense still looks really good. The rebounding has been much improved. So there have been things we are concerned about that seem to be riding the ship a little bit. And that's not to say there haven't been bad defensive performances within this stretch, but for the most part, they've done a pretty good job. And I think that'll be where they hang their hat. And this team is very much a feedback loop team. And what I mean by that is when they get a stop, they're able to run. So their half court offense isn't having to be relied on as much. They're able to get quick looks in transition, which I think is what they'd like to do. For the final part of the show, we'll, of course, be talking about some trades. So if anybody doesn't know, December 15th, is kind of the beginning of trade season in the NBA. The reason for that is it is the point where I think around 85% of the league is eligible to be traded. Most guys that were signed in the offseason can now be traded now that December 15th has passed. So we'll look at this from the Heat lens, of course. And we got to start with the marquee name on the market. In theory, he hasn't actually requested a trade, but Giannis Antetokounmpo. Lino, I mean, obviously we want him, but what are your general thoughts on Giannis? Are you trying not to give up a certain thing? Do you think it could happen? Just what are you thinking about this whole situation?
I think if the opportunity prevailed itself, that we should do absolutely anything it takes to trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo. There is maybe not a more no-brainer situation than adding this guy to this team in some capacity. I think we have all the pieces that he needs to succeed, and he's pretty much everything that we need in a player right now from a superstar standpoint, from a defensive standpoint, from offensive. Like, he would be our best scorer. He'd be our best defender to a certain degree, maybe by a smaller margin than the other positions, but he'd be best at scoring in the paint. He's shooting like 43.5% from three right now. Like, there's just, he would change our lives forever if he was on our roster. And I think it's important that the fan base realizes that, despite the fact that there's a slim chance that we'd be able to get him, and he hasn't even put in an actual trade request yet. So I would give up pretty much anything and everything to have him on the team just to see it work, because as fun and as interesting as this season is, it goes to show how much we need Spo and this collective roster to make a season competitive for us right now with the lack of a superstar like this one. So
Yeah.
that's my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I my first note is like in terms of what to give up, like not much to discuss, like literally everything. Like if it took that. Now, of course, there's the caveat that you need enough when Giannis gets here to keep him, because he's only got two full, like this year and next year, fully locked in, and then a player option after that. He'd be eligible to sign an extension in October. So you do need to kind of establish, hey, we want you here and we can support you winning here. I mean, I don't think a Heat 5-game losing streak would impact that, but that thought has crossed my mind. Like, man, we don't look as fun of a destination as we did like a month ago when we were the 3 seed, but hopefully we could turn things around. But yeah, I'd give up anything. My number one person I'd try to keep is Bam, just because I think
Mhm.
Bam's the best player on the team right now. And,
And the guy
and
he wants to play with too.
yeah, and I think defensively that could be one of the better front courts we've seen. Now, Giannis has taken a step back defensively, but I feel like with Miami, they could get the most out of him. Shooting would be huge if you're getting Giannis. So obviously, you want to keep Norm if you can, and maybe even get somebody back like Gary Trent, because it'll probably be several players going out in the Giannis deal. So if you could get a shooter back from Milwaukee, that would be ideal. If you want to take on bad money from Milwaukee, like I would definitely take Kuzma if it meant getting Giannis. Like there's really nothing I'd give up right now. Miami can trade 2 firsts and 4 swaps, easily give up all those. I would give up Khalil Ware. I know some Heat fans are, hesitant to do that, which I understand to a degree, but it's Giannis. This is a top 4 guy, and I know he gets hurt a little more than he used to, but still, I mean, it's not a conversation to me. And ultimately, if Ware's not included, the deal will not happen. So to me, it's like
Mhm.
you don't really have to think about that much. Now, the actual trade landscape, just to give people kind of an idea if they're not following this like an insane person like we are. So it starts. Shams reports that Giannis is going to meet with the Bucks like front office about the future, and so everybody's like, "Oh, is this a trade request?" And it's like, "No, he's just kind of checking in." And basically, Giannis is hurt right now, and the Bucks are losing a lot of games. And Giannis, I think, wants to be traded, but he doesn't want to be the bad guy. And the Bucks front office, like, you'd have to have them at gunpoint to trade the best player in franchise history, most likely. So it is, I hate to say it, a little reminiscent of the Damian Lillard thing, where like both sides, like Dame and Joe Cronin, like wanted the other guy to be the bad guy. And so right now it kind of feels like a staring contest. The reason I'm slightly pessimistic that this happens, at least anytime soon, like this season, is I don't think there's a great trade market for him right now, which sounds crazy. But I think we've seen so many all-in trades blow up recently. Zach Lowe's covered this well, so I don't know. Like the Spurs, if you're them, you were just on this hot streak of the NBA Cup. You have all these young guards. You have Wemby. Do you want to trade away Dylan Harper for Giannis? Like I don't know. That guy looks really good, and he's on Wemby's timeline. You go to Houston, they're a top 3 team in the West. You're not. I mean, do you want to give up a Min or Shingun? Probably not. So anyway, Oklahoma City's balling. So you go through the teams. The Knicks, I mean, yes, they want him, but if they could get him, they would have him already. That almost happened this summer. They don't have any draft picks. They traded them all for Mikal Bridges. So as a Heat fan, you can hear all this and say, well, it's just us. We're finally the last one at the dance. Like this is our time. But unfortunately, the alternative is always we'll just wait till the summer. There'll be more desperate teams because
Yeah. People
Houston,
will lose in the playoffs.
yeah,
People will realize they're actually a little bit further away than they thought.
yeah,
They'll play
Houston.
OKC and get blown up.
Yeah. OKC sweeps Houston, and Houston's like, okay, Bucks, we'll talk. Let's talk. How good is Şengün really? You can have him, So
Yeah.
that's my concern is that it might just not happen because I don't think the Bucks are just going to give him away, and I think it would take Giannis, however you want to say it, putting his thumb on the scale to a pretty strong degree, like, hey man, get me out of here. Like this
Mhm.
is over with. I'm ready
And
to
there's a
be gone.
really, really strong suggestion that they would send him somewhere in the West.
Yeah.
Uh, there's just historically speaking, teams do not like trading within the conference, and so timeline wise, the odds are still quite against us, though maybe less than in previous trade rumors. Without him actually coming out and saying, "Hey, I want to trade," or "I'm going to start making things miserable around here," which it would probably be pretty challenging for it to get more miserable than it is right now in Milwaukee. They've gone through a lot of struggles right now as an organization, and it'll be difficult for them to turn things around, I think, without going ahead and doing the full reset.
Yeah, that is Jake Fisher of Yahoo reported Milwaukee is actually looking to make like an all-in move to encourage Giannis to stay. Now, I didn't think the Miles Turner move was on the board for them. They made that happen out of nowhere. But that also reminds me of the Dame thing because Dame like kind of requested a trade, and Portland is like, no, let us show you what we're about to put together around you this summer, and they just re-signed Jeremy Grant, who ironically is one of the guys mentioned that Milwaukee's had interest in. But I'm like, Milwaukee has one tradable first round pick. Like Giannis, if you allow them to trade that to bring in Zach LaVine, like you're culpable at that point for this franchise's destruction. Like it is for everyone's best situation for you to go in and be like, hey, this has to end soon. But I get it. He's like royalty there. He probably doesn't want to upset anyone, but I don't know. I feel like I'd understand. Like, I'm not that mad at Jimmy Butler. and he was way worse than that. Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah. I
I don't
was
know.
perfectly fine with Jimmy wanting to go get paid somewhere else if he
Yeah,
was just a bit less of a jerk about it. But if he wasn't less of a jerk, he'd probably still be on the roster right now
it's
or
true.
something of that nature. So sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do. But we'll see, man. There's a person aspect of it in which, he may really just love it in Milwaukee. And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm good with this team just trying to figure things out. Of course, I'd love us to win more games because that's just who I am. But hey, I am the king of Wisconsin. Like, what am I gonna just go be another celebrity in one of these other bigger cities, or just live my life the way it is? But we'll see. I still got my fingers crossed. That is number one on my dream acquisition right now, and pretty much everybody after that comes with quite a lot of contingencies or prerequisites for my interest.
Yeah, I would say for myself, Giannis, obviously, anytime it's a top 5 player, yeah, for sure. If everyone else has been rumored star-wise, I'm kind of more of the mindset that I'd rather just look for, like, slight role player upgrades rather
Mm-hmm.
than go all in on some of these other guys, but we'll cover them just so people are aware. John
Bring me
Morant.
Quentin Post right now.
Yeah, oh god. Um, John Morant is another player that some people think could be traded. He's had off-court issues in Memphis. We don't have to go through all that. He is back and playing right now. He's just not playing well this season. He's injured often. Obviously, as you could tell, I'm setting this up. I'm not super interested in getting in the John Morant market. Also worth noting, it sounds like basically requested the coaching staff that is currently the creator of our offense be fired last season, Noah LaRoche, when he'd created Memphis's offense. So that would be kind of weird to bring in a guy to lead our offense that
You
hated this
could not live with your failure. Where did that bring you? Right back to me.
back to Noah LaRoche. So do you have any jaw takes? Also just so people know, he's making $39 million. So
US dollars, guys. US
yeah,
dollars.
and
Not
it's
good.
like, yeah. So what do you got?
Just I don't see why anybody like I see what people love about John Morant. He's an explosive, fun player who has had some great seasons in the past. But the player that he is right now solves almost none of our problems. He's not a defender. He is not, going to be much better of a passer than what we have right now. He is a terrible shooter currently shooting 19% from three. His career shooting 31%. That's not good and a big area of growth for us. And we already struggle with spacing. So he would already find it challenging to find shots because we don't have good spacing. Like, not only I feel like we're not a good team for him, I just feel like he's not gonna improve our situation. And you have to take some of these stats with a grain of salt in that when a guy's unhappy, when he's not getting the minutes that he expects, when he's maybe not healthy, the numbers are gonna fall. That just happens. But even in his prime, which I think we're kind of moving away from, unfortunately, there are a lot of flaws that don't help us, and that's all without discussing how is he going to be a personality fit in the Miami Heat organization. I'm one that's less concerned about that stuff. I think John Morant would come do his job. We had Shaq on this team. Like, if we can deal with Shaq, like, I think we can deal with John Morant. And so I'm not too concerned about that, but it would be probably an area of friction, at least to begin with. And so, yeah, there's not much I would do unless we were to get him for like nothing. Like, if we could get him for like a pick, I'd be like, sure, like a pick in Jovic or a pick in like Terry Rozier, if they're just trying to move off of it just because the market isn't great, I'd take a flyer on John Morant. But as far as bringing in a haul for him, I just wouldn't feel good about that at all.
Okay, just random, just looking at the numbers. Rozier's contract, Davion and a first. Yes or no?
Mm, God, Davion, that's what makes it hard. Yeah, I would do it if we are under 500 at the deadline. I would do it. If we
Okay.
are over 500 at the deadline, I would not do it.
Okay. All right. Also, while we're here, Ja, LaMelo, Trey Young. Those are the three kind of unhappy point guards people say could or couldn't be available. Do you have a strong preference of those three if the Heat were to acquire one of them?
Trey probably at the top. I do think that Trey would be incredible actually in our offense. I think he would. I think he's still a really good player. I think he has much less issues than the other two, and I do think he'd enjoy playing in this system and thrive in it, and also still give us some really great pick and roll wrinkles that we can go to with him as a primary ball handler and him working with Bam. And I guess if Khalil Ware was still here, the potential of Khalil Ware. So he's probably at the top, and then LaMelo, who I think is a very talented player. I just don't know how serious of a basketball player he's willing to be, and so there's concerns there. But the skill is certainly there. It's like if Jovic was as good as we all really wanted him to be, it's kind of like adding another, just wild card into the building in a way that I think can be healthy in certain ways, but in other times it would cause
Yeah.
friction.
I if LaMelo didn't have so many health issues, I would be like very in on
Hmm.
LaMelo. Like he
Yeah.
plays so fast paced. He can create one on one. He can shoot. He's big. He's been in a joke of a franchise his whole career. Like he has contributed to the clown show, but still, you could talk yourself into him being like the ideal reclamation project. Unfortunately, he's just always injured, and
Hmm.
he's on a tanking team, so I'm sure they don't like push him to come back, but it seems like he really has like some chronic ankle issues. And someone like LaMelo, I feel like would cost multiple firsts. So it's like at that point, you just empty the cupboard if Giannis or somebody better does become available. So not quite worth it, but interesting. Okay, this next one, Anthony Davis. What do you think?
Now, I think this is where we're going to have our most contention because I would totally trade for Anthony Davis. I think he's getting a really bad rap for, you know, things that were outside of his control, being traded to Dallas, being given this pressure to play through injuries, which obviously led to him getting more injured. And overall, I live in Dallas and people here are very upset about that trade still. And I do think they project that onto AD a lot, despite him being, I think, still an all star level basketball player. And I think on both sides of the ball, he would be amazing next to Bam. Even if we just think back to how they played together in the Olympics, like that is something we could have all the time. And I would love that very much. And I'd probably give up maybe not as much as I'd give up for Giannis. Like I'd probably keep it to young. I'd give up Ware. I'd give up Kasparis some picks, and then all the draft stuff. If I could keep Tyler and Bam in any capacity, I probably would try to. But that is a guy that I think could really do well in Miami and with our team here.
Yeah, I just wish he didn't make so much money, man. He makes
Not our money.
$58 million. He
Carnival's
makes
paying for that.
he makes more than Giannis. Um, yeah, I wish 2020 bubble Anthony Davis that destroyed the Miami Heat. I wish he was around because 2025 Anthony Davis cannot shoot at all, which I do think would be an issue. I think we'd probably have the best defense in the league if we had he and Bam. But you also have availability issues with AD. He's older than the other guys we talked about. He could actually be a free agent this summer. I believe if I have this correctly, as a $62 million player option. So he could opt out of that. So he's probably going to want a fat max this summer. And then who's your best creator at that point? Like Tyler's probably in the deal. So then
Yeah.
it doesn't work for me. But
Yeah.
also it's the Heat. Sometimes I just get stars and figure it out later. Is there anybody? We only went over a few names at this stage of trade season. These are kind of the guys talked about the most. Is there any stars or role players that you just kind of crossed your mind in terms of could be interesting fits on this team?
Maybe the opposite. I just feel like there's not really any role players available. I don't know if there's guys that aren't just superstars demanding trades. Like, I feel like we haven't really gotten a lot of conversations around other players that might be available for trade. Maybe those conversations happen a little bit closer to the deadline,
Yeah.
but it's difficult to say. But I would be part of me is hesitant to bring somebody new into the system, but part of me is like, that's what happens at a trade deadline all the time. Like everybody has to come in and learn a new way of basketball when they join a team in the middle of the season. So bringing in some more shooting would be great. I think having a change at the wing position is going to be a necessity if we really want to take this season seriously. As much as I love Jaime, I love Pella, I love Andrew Wiggins, I just don't know if we have enough talent in that part of our roster to feel confident going into the playoffs, at least with what we've seen so far. Good players, if they play their best 99th percentile outcome, great players, but more than likely not going to be enough to get us over the hump, at least to get us into a second, third round, which would be a great outcome for this season, but just hard to see with the lack of shooting out there right now.
Yeah, yeah. Archetype wise, I think a stretch four would be really helpful for Bam
Hmm.
and Ware. Anytime they're not on the court together, to have a third. Well, I'm describing what Jovic should be, but just realized that halfway through the sentence. But
Oh,
yeah, somebody
no.
that could be Jovic and actually make shots, but even less so with the passing and stuff. Really, just somebody that can shoot and like rebound for that size. Harrison Barnes, like he won't be traded, but like someone like that, like I'm not talking about any kind of like great starter, but just somebody you trust to come down, like come in, knock down shots. Tobias Harris, I don't know why Detroit would want to trade him, but that type of guy. And then obviously the high end of that is Trey Murphy the third, but everyone
Mhm.
wants him. And that he's somebody that would probably take multiple first round picks. I honestly
Yeah.
might be okay with that. Like that dude.
I didn't even know he'd be available. That's crazy.
It's just like everybody wants him, so I think everybody's calling
Yeah.
New Orleans. I don't know if they're really making him available. Herb Jones is somebody I just think is an awesome basketball player. We don't really need another like great defender that's a questionable shooter, but he's always felt like a heat culture guy to me. It's another New Orleans player that could be available. But yeah, hopefully they'll prioritize some shooting. The other thing with this roster, as we close here, is they have a lot of solid players. So like bringing in a solid role player, it's just hard to figure what their impact will be, I guess. Like obviously you bring in a star, it's like okay, that you reorient everything around them. But let's say they did trade for Tobias Harris, like do you start him alongside Wiggins? I don't think you'd start him over Wiggins, but if you don't, if you start him and Wiggins and Bam, then one of the three guards goes to the bench. Do you bench Tyler? Like, do you bench Norm? Do you bench Davion? Like, it's a
Yeah.
weird hierarchy where like you almost have to trade for a star because if you don't, it's just going to get really weird about how you reorient everything around these new acquisitions.
Yeah. Unless we trade for some actual bench players, like
Yeah.
not necessarily a role player, but like a guy coming off the bench, being third string center or power forward. Um, yeah, it's gonna get so weird because we're just right there in the middle, and it's so hard to make decisions from that standpoint. Way easier when you're like so close. You just need one thing to get over the hump, or way easier when you're way at the bottom and it's like everything must go. We'll take whatever we can get. We're in the messiest version of team building as you can be.
Yes. Oh, you know what? Last hypothetical for you before we go. So let's say it is February. We've rolled around to the trade deadline. And let's say the Heat are like 2 games over 500. So around where they are now. And Team X, whoever it is, let's say it's like a playoff ish team, calls and offers matching expiring salary, but like not a good player, and a first for Wiggins. Or like, like we got from the Warriors last year, like probably the 20th
Mhm.
overall pick in this draft. Would you do it?
No, probably not. For like the 20th overall pick, uh, just helping another team win a championship and shipping off a guy that we like a lot just doesn't seem worth it for that and some expirings.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that we need the expirings for next year, anyways. Like our cap space is what it is. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
do you feel
Yeah.
like you would do that?
I don't think so. Wiggins just seems to be the guy that contenders want from the Heat. We've heard the Lakers
Mhm.
talked about. He was somebody the Bucks talked about like trying to entice Giannis to stay. So I don't know. If it was like a first and like kind of an interesting young player, then we're getting in the range. I'd probably think about it. But just a
Yeah.
bad first. I just because the thought process is you get an extra first, you go into the summer, and then you can trade a bunch of firsts for the star. Like in theory, yeah, that's cool, but you could have said that about the Golden State trade. That just became Kasparis, who could be good, could be terrible. We have no idea right now.
We'll
But
never freaking know, I guess.
well, I mean, this Brooklyn game, there could be a lot of guys out, so we'll see. But probably not. So yeah, that was just something I was thinking about. I know everything's been reported by like Jake Fisher and other people as the Heat will probably look to be buyers at the deadline. But I was just
Mhm.
curious if it kind of looks like we're stagnating around 500. But Wiggins is so important. Like if you took Wiggins off this team, there's
We
not
would fall all right now.
yeah, there's not really another small forward that can guard and shoot. Not that Wiggins has been like on fire from three, but he's respected out there. Like I think you then
Yeah,
have to,
people know that at any point in time he could turn it on, so they always have to guard him.
yeah,
Like,
and he's good defensively. I know some of the on-off numbers aren't great for Wiggins, but I think he's been a big positive ultimately. So,
mhm.
but it's like a positive for the 8 seed. Like at that point, maybe you do just cash in for a first. I'm not sure. Also, are they going to pay him? I mean, he's got. Let's see. Yeah, he can be a free agent this summer, I believe.
I
He's got a
see.
player
And that's another
option.
thing too. I'd like to find out what that looks like. Like, can we get Andrew Wiggins on a very team friendly contract if he's comfortable and wants to be here,
Yeah,
rather than moving his family again?
yeah, it's true, and that honestly, we'll probably get that answer at the trade deadline. If he stays, they're probably planning on paying him around 30 million a year, maybe like 2 years, 60, something like that.
Mhm.
And if he gets moved, we'll be like, okay, they did not want to trade, pay him a long term
Yeah.
deal. So that could play into it as well. There's actually a lot of guys on the Heat that have interesting contract things when you look at it. Obviously, Tyler has the extension. Norm is an expiring. Rozier's obviously an expiring. Simone's an expiring. Wiggins could opt out, be expiring. It could be an eventful trade deadline. I just don't know which way it's going to go. But whichever way it does go, we'll be with you guys through sickness and in health. For myself, Micah, my good friend Lino, thank you all for tuning in. Please comment. Let us know any fun trade ideas you have. What player would fix the Heat? And yeah, keep rocking with us. Like, subscribe, do all those fun things. Hopefully, the next time we talk to you, it'll be after a 5-game winning streak. Everyone have a happy holidays, and we will see you next time.